Hey guys, tonight we are going to wander down muddy lanes, through windswept fields, and into the creaky wooden doorways of places that you, as a poor medieval peasant on the road, might actually have called home for a night. Imagine it, no backpacking hostels, no neatly folded towels waiting in a room with air conditioning, and definitely no complimentary breakfast. Instead, you've got blistered feet, a tunic that hasn't been washed in weeks, and the distant promise of shelter that may or may not even exist. The adventure is charming, if you're watching from your comfy bed, but you probably wouldn't survive this trek with the same enthusiasm, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your current location and local time in the comments? I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a track that's not really a road, more like a suggestion scratched into the landscape by countless hooves and carts. Dust clings to your calves in summer, in spring, mud reaches up to your knees, and you start wondering if you'll leave your shoes behind in the muck. Travelers in the Middle Ages rarely had the luxury of even proper footwear. Most peasants walked barefoot or in rough leather sandals. Historians still argue whether these endless tracks were maintained by local lords or just worn down by sheer persistence. Either way, you don't complain too loudly. The road is the only thing connecting you to markets, fairs, or distant kin. You pass milestones, sometimes literally. Roman roads had left a faint memory of stone-set markers across Europe, though by your century, many are toppled, overgrown, or stolen by clever villagers to reinforce a pigpen. A quirky tidbit: some peasants swore that walking along an old Roman road made your journey shorter, even if it didn't. The superstition was less about physics and more about a kind of psychological GPS. Daylight is burning out, and the countryside is not exactly bursting with rest stops. You peer ahead, spotting nothing but hedges, fields, and the occasional flock of sheep that look comfier than you feel. If you're lucky, a village lies 2 or 3 miles down, but distances are slippery in this age without signposts. A hill looks closer than it is, a church tower teasing you in the distance may take hours to reach. And unlike today, you can't just pull out your phone and grumble at Google Maps. Your best bet is asking passing strangers, who will either give vague directions involving the old oak or send you down a lane ending at their cousin's turnip patch. The physical discomfort of travel is constant. Roads are rutted by cart wheels, clogged with puddles, or in winter, frozen so hard your breath crackles in the air. Every joint in your body aches from walking all day. You crave even a patch of straw under a roof, but until then, you just keep trudging. You notice that roads often double as ditches, guiding water straight into your boots. And if you happen to stumble upon a bridge, don't celebrate too soon. Many bridges had toll keepers, eager to empty your coin purse faster than a modern airport vending machine. As night deepens, danger grows. Bandits sometimes wait by lonely stretches, hoping for a traveler with more than turnips in his sack. Wolves howl from the distance, though honestly, it's more the thought of other humans you should worry about. That's the paradox of medieval travel. The wild looks frightening, but the real hazard wears the same patched tunic as you. Still, there's a rhythm to the road. You hear the creak of cart axles, the clop of horses, the chatter of a peddler muttering to himself as he counts rosary beads. Sometimes, you'll walk alongside pilgrims, who lend a sense of safety but also a soundtrack of endless hymn singing. Other times, merchants march briskly past, their packs smelling faintly of spices or dried fish, making you realize how empty your own stomach is. The air is alive with scent, smoke drifting from cottages, manure spread on fields, wildflowers clinging to hedgerows. It's oddly comforting. Even if your feet scream, your nose reminds you that you're not completely alone out here. And let's be real, that manure-fertilized air would probably make a modern traveler wrinkle their nose. But to you, it's the perfume of survival. By the time stars blink awake, you've walked farther than you care to admit. You crave somewhere, anywhere, to curl up. Villages lie scattered along major routes, but if you're stuck in open country, your options dwindle. Poor peasants didn't have coin for inns, those were reserved for merchants, pilgrims with fat purses, or suspiciously well-dressed strangers. For you, the journey is about improvisation. And tonight, improvisation might just mean finding shelter near a village hearth. If you're lucky enough to reach one. Tomorrow, you'll learn quickly that hospitality is a gamble, sometimes generous, sometimes grudging, but tonight, as you trudge toward the faint glow of firelight in the distance, you're simply grateful the road hasn't swallowed you whole. And when your bare toes stumble against another rut, you almost laugh at the thought, all this misery, just for a patch of straw to sleep on. You limp into the edge of a small village, grateful to see low cottages crouched together like weary animals. Smoke curls from thatched roofs, carrying with it the smell of barley porridge and wood smoke. For you, this is better than the sight of a castle. It means warmth, human company, and maybe, just maybe, a corner to sleep in. The question is, will anyone let you inside? Hospitality, when you're poor and anonymous, is never guaranteed. A villager might open the door, squint at you through the smoke of their hearth, and decide you look more like trouble than a guest. Yet, there are times when generosity kicks in. Many peasants understood that travelers, especially poor ones, lived on the edge of luck. You might be invited to crouch near the fire, though don't imagine a soft mattress. No, you're more likely kneeling on hard-packed earth, catching whiffs of stewing cabbage while your skin prickles with heat from the flames. The hearth is the center of village life. It's not just for cooking, it's warmth, light, and even a kind of spiritual anchor. Some households left their fire burning continuously for months, believing it unlucky to let it go out. You, the weary traveler, might be told to curl up near the embers, but only after the family dogs have claimed their usual spots. Dogs in medieval villages had seniority, and if one growls at you for stealing its warmth, you'll learn quickly who really runs the place. A mainstream historical fact to soothe your curiosity: medieval English law actually required households to host the poor on certain feast days, and some villages kept communal rules about hospitality. But here's the quirky tidbit: sometimes families only offered lodging out of sheer superstition, fearing that turning away a stranger might be like offending a disguised saint or angel. Better to share a crust of bread than risk eternal bad luck. Historians still argue whether this generosity was rooted more in faith, fear, or genuine kindness. So you sit cross-legged near the hearth, trying not to cough too loudly as smoke stings your eyes. Chimneys aren't universal yet. Smoke gathers inside until it drifts lazily out through a hole in the thatch. Your hair smells like a campfire in minutes, and your lungs probably shave off a few years of life expectancy. Yet, there's something hypnotic about watching the sparks. Sleep presses down on you, and the hard floor doesn't feel so bad anymore. The conversation around you is half intelligible. Villagers speak in their local dialect, which even neighboring communities sometimes find puzzling. Still, you catch words about crops, gossip about a miller's daughter, and complaints about the weather. So basically, nothing changes in 800 years. Someone hands you a wooden bowl with thick stew floating with mystery chunks. You don't ask what the meat is, because you're hungry enough to ignore the possibility of rat. If you're truly lucky, the family clears space in a loft or barn, laying straw for you to rest. But most nights, the hearth is your destiny. A tiny spark of luxury might be a coarse blanket shared reluctantly, though fleas will make sure you don't sleep too deeply. In fact, many peasants didn't even see fleas as a problem. Everyone had them, so scratching was just part of life. You lie awake, scratching along with the chorus of the household, blending right in, outside. The village dogs bark at shadows. Inside, the fire pops, casting red light on wooden beams darkened by centuries of soot. You realize how fragile your comfort is. Tomorrow, this family might refuse you, and you'll be left wandering. But for tonight, you soak in the crackling warmth and the smell of bread baking on the embers. There's also the risk of overstaying your welcome. A night, maybe two if you help with chores, is all you'll get. Anything longer, and whispers begin, maybe you're a beggar, maybe a thief. Hospitality works best when it's fleeting. The longer you linger, the more suspicious you become. The hearth is a blessing, but also a reminder, as a poor peasant traveler, you live on borrowed kindness. You warm your hands, listen to the snores around you, and watch sparks fade into ash. And you can't help but think, as your eyes finally close, tomorrow, you might be turned away, left to the mercy of church porches or alehouse floors. But tonight, just for a few smoky hours, you have something close to home. When the morning rooster crows you awake, your eyes sting from smoke and your body aches from lying on a stone-hard floor. The villagers are already moving, feeding pigs, hauling water, mumbling morning prayers. You rub the stiffness from your neck, thank your hosts as politely as your sleep-deprived voice can manage, and step back onto the road. The warmth of the hearth fades quickly as the chill creeps back into your bones. Now you begin to wonder, where will you lay your head tonight? The answer often comes in the form of holy architecture. Churches, abbeys, and even small chapels dot the medieval landscape. To you, the weary traveler, these sacred buildings offer more than sermons. They offer roofs. Church porches, broad covered entrances where parishioners gathered before services, sometimes became unofficial hostels for the desperate. You shuffle into one at dusk, grateful for the dry stone under your back. Even if the wind whistles freely through the arch, the porch floor isn't exactly a featherbed. Cold limestone presses against your spine, and carvings of saints and gargoyles stare at you from above, judging your unwashed socks. Still, compared to an open field, the porch is a gift. And if you're lucky, a passing priest might offer bread, though he'll probably scowl as if reminding you this is charity, not entitlement. Historians still argue whether church officials truly encouraged hospitality for the poor, or whether they simply tolerated it as a side effect of their duty. Inside, cloisters sometimes offered a step up from porches. Picture long stone walkways around a central courtyard, with arches opening to the night sky. If you sneak in or are granted permission, you might tuck yourself into a corner, lulled to sleep by the echo of monks chanting Compline. Here's a quirky tidbit: some monasteries had rules about where beggars could sleep, often near the kitchens, so their snores didn't interrupt the divine office. Imagine being filed away like noisy livestock, just to keep holy chants undisturbed. Of course, not every priest is keen on freeloaders. Many frown at peasants cluttering sacred ground, especially if they suspect you might carry lice or worse. And let's be real, you almost certainly do. Some churches even lock their doors at night, more concerned about thieves than wanderers. In those cases, the porch is your only option, a compromise between holy protection and earthly discomfort. Still, there's safety in sleeping near a church. People believe the holy aura wards off bandits, demons, and other late-night nuisances. Whether or not it's true, you feel calmer with carved angels overhead than with a hedgerow rustling beside your ear. And if you wake to the sound of bells at dawn, well, that's your alarm clock. No snooze button, just monks ringing in the new day with all the enthusiasm of a modern barista shouting double espresso. The sensory details are unforgettable. The stone is icy beneath you, your breath misting in the air. Candlelight flickers through stained glass, scattering colored patterns across your face before fading into night. You might curl under your cloak, clutching it close as a shield against the cold, pretending the porch is a real bedroom. A cat slips past, chasing mice, and for a second, you're almost jealous. Cats in churches often sleep warmer than human visitors. Sometimes, the experience tilts toward the surreal. A procession of monks glides by, chanting low psalms, their voices rising like waves. You stir from half-sleep, unsure if you're dreaming or if heaven has decided to provide a soundtrack to your misery. Later, when the bells ring, you're ushered out quickly so the porch can serve its proper purpose, welcoming the faithful, not sheltering the unwashed. And so, with stiff legs and smoke-stung eyes, you shuffle back to the road. The church porch gave you shelter, yes, but not rest. Tonight might be different. You might end up in an alehouse, on a bench sticky with spilled beer, snoring alongside strangers who reek of hops. But for now, the memory of the church porch lingers, cold, uncomfortable, yet strangely comforting. Your stomach growls as you limp along the rutted lane, but another need is louder: sleep. By now you know the village hearth is never certain, and church porches are drafty at best. So your eyes light up when you spot the swinging sign of an alehouse. The creak of its wooden door, the laughter spilling out into the dusk, and the smell of warm malt tell you that, for a coin or even just good timing, you might find a bench to collapse on. Alehouses, unlike inns, weren't grand establishments with featherbeds. They were extensions of someone's home, where homemade ale was brewed and sold. That means you step straight into a smoky, crowded room where peasants drink from shared mugs, gossip about taxes, and sing songs only 3 notes wide. It's rowdy, smelly, and oddly comforting. Here, at least, you can pretend you're part of the crowd instead of a lonely wanderer. If you're broke, you might linger until closing, hoping the alewife takes pity and lets you stretch out on a bench. The benches aren't padded, just planks slick with spilled drink, but after walking 20 miles, you'd sleep on a pile of turnips if you had to. A quirky tidbit: alehouses sometimes doubled as stables, so if there's no room inside, you might curl up in straw with the animals. And honestly, the donkey is probably cleaner than half the drunks. The atmosphere is rough but alive. The hearth burns hot, smoke curls under the rafters. And someone bangs a drum made from a stretched goatskin. You press against the wall, half enjoying the warmth, half trying not to get elbowed by a farmer recounting his best sheep story for the 10th time. Historians still argue whether alehouses were community centers or dens of vice. To you, the exhausted traveler, the answer is simple: they're beds. Coins matter here. A wealthier peasant might pay for ale and secure a corner. Without coin, you rely on charm, chores, or simply being too pathetic to throw out. Sometimes, alewives allowed poor wanderers to sleep upright at the tables, reasoning that a snoring body was less trouble than dragging you back into the road. Other nights, you're hustled out with the rest, forced to weigh whether the stable straw will scratch less than the wooden bench would have. The sensory overload is hard to forget. The floor crunches with nutshells and bones, mugs slam onto tables, laughter rises like thunder. When the ale flows, stories get taller: ghosts on the heath, saints appearing in turnip fields. A cousin who once saw a unicorn. You smile at the nonsense, though your eyelids droop heavily. Eventually, your head lolls onto your arms, and the chorus of drunks becomes your lullaby. Not all alehouse nights are peaceful. A scuffle might break out, 2 men grappling over dice or insults. If fists fly near you, the safest move is to slide under the bench and pretend to be invisible. It's not glamorous, but it beats a broken nose. By dawn, when the last embers smolder and the drunk stumble home, you wake with a stiff back, smelling like a barrel. The bench, the floor, or the stable, it doesn't matter. Tonight, you've had shelter and warmth, enough to drag your aching body another day down the road. Tomorrow, though, you may not be so lucky. You might find yourself curled beneath a stone cross, praying thieves pass you by. The road stretches onward, and tonight fortune looks different. No alehouse lantern flickers in the distance, no hearth smoke beckons. Instead, as twilight deepens, you see a stone cross at the roadside, standing tall against the fading sky. These wayside crosses, or little shrines, scattered across medieval Europe, were meant for prayer, but for the desperate, they became makeshift bedrooms under open air. You shuffle closer, cloak wrapped tight. The base of the cross has a narrow ledge where you can sit or lean, and at least the structure gives you a sense of protection. Travelers swore that sleeping under holy symbols warded off bandits and even witches. Whether it worked is questionable. Historians still argue whether bandits truly avoided shrines, or if that's just wishful thinking written into pilgrim tales. But when you're poor and tired, superstition is better than nothing. The shrine itself is simple, sometimes just a wooden post with a carved figure of Christ, sometimes a stone cross covered in moss, or a niche with a painted saint tucked inside. Pilgrims pause here to pray, leaving tokens like scallop shells or wax figurines. You, however, leave nothing but your weary body curled at its base. A quirky tidbit: in some places, people stuffed tiny charms or herbs into the cracks of roadside crosses, believing it kept demons from traveling along the roads. Tonight, you sleep with lavender sprigs crumbling under your cheek. It isn't comfortable. Cold seeps from the ground, your cloak does little to stop the damp, and the night air is filled with rustling hedges and owl calls. Your body twitches at every sound, and you keep glancing up at the stone figure looming above, hoping it's watching over you rather than watching you. The sense of being judged by a saintly stare can be both comforting and unnerving. Yet the shrine is more than superstition. Villagers sometimes placed them deliberately at crossroads or boundaries, where spirits were thought to linger. Sleeping there means you're technically in the company of both holy guardians and whatever restless souls wander by. Not exactly the cozy vibes of a four-poster bed. The night drags. Your back aches, your stomach rumbles, and dew clings to your hair. Passing travelers may give you a sympathetic nod, or, if they're nervous, a suspicious glare, as though you might leap up and rob them. You can't help but smile at the irony. You, a penniless peasant, looking dangerous while hugging a stone cross for dear life. By dawn, your limbs are stiff. And your skin feels clammy. Still, you're alive, and your sack is untouched. Maybe the superstition worked, or maybe luck simply yawned in your favor. Either way, you rise from beneath the shrine, stretch, and prepare for another day on the road. Tonight, you might be luckier. Perhaps an empty barn will welcome you, with straw that smells of animals instead of moss and stone. Your steps drag heavier today, but by sunset, salvation appears in the form of a barn. You spot its timber frame leaning against the twilight, doors ajar, hay spilling like golden straw from a careless sack. No landlord is standing at the gate, no toll is demanded. It's just an open building, used daily by villagers but, after dark, turning into the unofficial motel for the wandering poor. Barns and granaries were the hidden backbone of medieval sleepovers. If the farmer didn't catch you, you could curl up on straw that smelled faintly of oats, warm and soft compared to stone porches or roadside shrines. You push your way inside, the dry stalks crunching underfoot, and sink into the heaps. For the first time in days, your body sighs as if it has found a mattress, but comfort comes with hazards. Rodents scamper nearby, fat mice squeaking as they rummage through grain. A quirky tidbit: rats were so common in granaries that some peasants swore you could tell the quality of the grain by how quickly the rodents attacked it. Tonight, you're the grain substitute, as you feel whiskers brush your sleeve. Fleas and lice, always eager for a midnight feast, join the party. And if the farmer does catch you, expect more than harsh words. Sometimes it's a boot, sometimes a pitchfork waved theatrically in your direction. Granaries were precious, spoiled or stolen grain could ruin an entire village's winter. Historians still argue whether communities turned a blind eye to travelers sneaking in, or whether farmers fiercely guarded their stores. What's certain is that desperate peasants kept trying, night after night, because a dry pile of straw beat shivering under hedgerows. You lie there, half hidden in hay, your ears tuned to every creak of the timbers. Above you, pigeons flutter, roosting in the rafters. The smell is a mixture of dust, oats, and animal musk, not pleasant, but oddly grounding. Your cloak muffles the scratchy straw, and warmth gathers around you as if the barn itself is lending you a hug. Of course, the illusion shatters when the animals stir. A cow moves from the next stall, shifting in its sleep, a horse snorts, stamping a hoof. You realize you're not alone, not really. But in truth, you don't mind. Animals mean safety, warmth, and less chance of being mistaken for a thief. If you're clever, you even edge closer to their bodies, stealing their heat like a medieval electric blanket. Sleep finally drapes over you, thicker than your threadbare cloak. The barn creaks in rhythm with your breath. Outside, the world spins through another night, owls hunting, wind combing fields, villagers snoring in their cottages. Inside, you're a trespasser, yes, but also a survivor. When dawn light filters through the slats, painting golden stripes across the straw, you rise sore but grateful. No one has jabbed you with a pitchfork, and you've stolen a night of comfort from the farmer's granary. Tonight, who knows? Maybe you'll trade straw for cabbage leaves in the market square, or a spot under painted banners at a fair. The road hums with more life today. You hear wagon wheels squeaking and merchants calling out as they head toward the beating heart of local trade, the market square. By daylight, these spaces are crowded, chaotic, and noisy, every patch of cobblestone covered with stalls of fish, barrels of ale, piles of cabbages, and bolts of coarse cloth. But when the last bell rings and the vendors pack up, a strange hush falls, and the square transforms into something else entirely, a free dormitory for the desperate. You shuffle across the abandoned stalls, the air still thick with the smell of onions and half-rotten turnips. Wooden counters stand like skeletons of daytime commerce, their rough planks sticky with ale spills and cabbage juice. You pick a corner where the shadow of a pillory stretches across the stones and lay down, cloak bundled beneath your head. Compared to straw in a barn, the ground is unforgiving, but at least it's public. No farmer will chase you off here, a mainstream historical fact. Market squares were deliberately designed as open civic spaces, not just for trade but for announcements, punishments, and gatherings. By night, they became contested ground between the needy and the authorities. Historians still argue whether townsfolk tolerated peasants sleeping there or drove them out as vagrants. The truth probably shifted from town to town, even from week to week. It's a risky bet. Rats scuttle between piles of vegetable scraps, searching for the last crumbs. You roll onto your side to avoid a puddle of soured milk. From the edges of the square, cats prowl confidently, village mousers on the night shift. A quirky tidbit: some medieval towns encouraged cats in market areas, believing they were tiny guardians against famine since fewer rats meant safer grain. Tonight, you silently thank the feline patrols for keeping the whiskered hordes away from your face. The square isn't silent for long. Stragglers wander through, a drunk who sings off-key as he stumbles home, a guard making rounds with a lantern, a stray child curled beside her mother's stall. You keep one eye open, heart thumping whenever footsteps draw close. Sleep comes in short bursts, easily broken by echoes bouncing between timbered houses. You feel exposed, more display than sleeper, yet there's also a sense of belonging. You're not the only one stretched across the stones. A cluster of travelers snoozes near the well, cloaks pulled tight. A beggar curls under the eaves of the guildhall, muttering in his sleep. The square at night becomes a patchwork quilt of human survival. Each body claiming a corner of cold stone, morning comes rudely. Before dawn, vendors return, carts rattling, animals braying, voices rising. You're jostled awake as stalls are rebuilt around you, the smell of fresh fish suddenly replacing your dreams. Someone shouts at you to move, there's no room for sleepers when trade begins. You scramble up, cloak dusted with cabbage leaves, and slip out before being chased with broom handles. You leave the square rubbing your sore back, stomach growling at the memory of food you couldn't afford. The day stretches ahead, and you wonder, will tonight bring the ordered hospitality of a monastery, or another scramble for scraps of sleep? By now you've learned that survival on the road is a lottery. One night you're curled under a stone cross, the next you're sharing cabbage scraps with rats in the square. But when fortune tilts your way, you find yourself at the gates of a monastery. These stone-walled sanctuaries, scattered across Europe, carry reputations not only for prayer but also for hospitality. And when you stagger up, dusty and footsore, you dare to hope the monks will open their doors, hospitality in monastic life had rules, sometimes strict, sometimes generous. Benedict's rule, written centuries earlier, instructed monks to receive guests as if they were Christ himself. That meant a traveler, even a poor one, was to be greeted with water for washing, a meal, and perhaps a bed in a guest hall. Historians still argue whether these practices were consistently followed or slowly eroded as monasteries grew wealthier. To you, standing at the threshold, it feels like the difference between heaven and another freezing ditch. If admitted, you're shown to a plain hall with wooden benches, maybe even a straw mattress if the monastery is prosperous. Don't expect comfort beyond necessity. The monks believed in humility, not featherbeds. Still, a roof over your head and bread in your belly feels luxurious compared to the market square. A quirky tidbit: some monasteries had strict one-night-only rules for poor guests, ensuring the line of beggars didn't become permanent residents. You might be given bread, cheese, and ale, blessed with a prayer, and politely nudged out at dawn. Yet in pilgrimage hotspots, where waves of travelers pass daily, monasteries often built larger hospices, designed almost like ancient hostels. There, you could share a hall with dozens of snoozing bodies, each snoring in harmony like a medieval sleep orchestra. The sounds and smells inside are different from taverns. Instead of drunken shouting, you hear monks chanting, their voices echoing through stone corridors. The air smells of wax, herbs, and freshly baked bread. Candles gutter softly, shadows flickering on painted icons. For a few hours, you feel as though the world's hardships are muffled, wrapped in monastic calm, but the tranquility has limits. Monks are wary of guests who linger or cause disruption. A wrong word, too much begging, or even excessive scratching at your lice could earn you a stern look and a quick dismissal. And if the monastery is poor itself, you might receive only the barest crusts before being waved on your way. Hospitality is sacred, yes, but resources are never infinite. Still, when you lie on the straw that night, you can almost forget the bruises of travel. Outside, the bells toll the hours, marking time as steadily as your own breathing. Sleep comes deeper here, safer, shielded by holy walls. You drift off with a strange comfort. Even if tomorrow you're back to begging under shrines, tonight you've tasted the rare luxury of structured kindness. At dawn, monks move quietly, shaking you gently awake. They press bread into your hands, maybe a blessing murmured over your bowed head. You leave with a lighter heart, even if your sack remains just as empty. And as you step back onto the road, you can't help but wonder if the next roof will be a toll hut's, where comfort shrinks back to a wooden bench by a bridge. Leaving the monastery behind, you soon find yourself trudging along a muddy road that dips toward a river. Crossing it isn't free. A toll hut squats by the bridge like a watchful spider, and the keeper eyes you with suspicion the moment you shuffle near. Poor peasants like you don't exactly inspire trust. You're more likely to slow traffic than to pay hefty tolls. Still, sometimes, if the night grows late, or if storms make the bridge treacherous, these huts offer an odd form of shelter. Inside, the toll hut is hardly more than a shack, a rough-hewn timber box, smoke curling through gaps in the roof, and a single stool that squeaks under the keeper's weight. No guest beds here, no straw mattresses. Not even a stable corner. If the keeper lets you in, you might be offered a spot on the dirt floor beside the embers of his fire. Think of it as complimentary accommodation, except the price is likely your pride, because you'll need to flatter, plead, or promise future coin you don't actually have. Mainstream fact: medieval Europe had thousands of toll stations, especially in the Holy Roman Empire, where lords and bishops profited by charging merchants. Historians still argue whether these tolls protected travelers from bandits or simply drained their purses. For you, the poor peasant, protection sounds nice, but mostly it's just another hurdle. And in truth, the toll keeper's hut feels less like a fortress of safety and more like an awkward broom closet with a suspicious landlord. A quirky tidbit: some toll keepers doubled as gossip hubs, knowing exactly who crossed the bridge, with what goods, and at what hour. In a way, they were medieval border control officers mixed with nosy neighbors. You might overhear talk of caravans, passing nobles, or even pilgrims marching toward shrines. If you're lucky, the keeper might share stale bread while bragging about the smugglers he outsmarted last week. But don't imagine much sleep here. Every creak of the bridge outside jolts you awake. Wagons rumble, horses snort, and drunkards argue with the keeper about fees. And if rain lashes the roof, droplets leak through, pattering against your face until you shuffle into a new damp corner. You thought monasteries were strict, but at least they didn't charge you 3 chickens just to cross a plank of wood. Sometimes you're not even allowed inside. Instead, you curl beneath the bridge itself, wedged between stones, listening to water slosh below. The air is damp and cold, but the thudding footsteps overhead create a strange lullaby. It's one of those moments where you realize travel isn't always about grand destinations. Sometimes it's about not drowning while you nap. As dawn breaks, the toll keeper shuffles you out, grumbling about freeloaders. Your bones ache from the hard floor, but the road calls again. Bridges crossed, coins begged, nights survived, it all blurs together. And yet, you keep moving, because somewhere ahead lies another possibility, the quiet dignity of a farmhouse, where families sometimes take in weary strangers for a single night of hearth and warmth. By late afternoon, the hum of a seasonal fair reaches your ears, carried on the wind like a promise of food, warmth, and crowds that might tolerate your presence. Fairs were temporary, chaotic bursts of life, tents pitched on open fields, merchants hawking cloth, spices, and livestock, and entertainers performing for coins or scraps of bread. To some, they were noisy spectacles. To you, the itinerant peasant, they are sanctuaries where anonymity can be found in the sheer density of bodies. You can blend into this organized chaos more easily than anywhere else, hoping that the transience of the fair keeps officials from noticing you. Even if tomorrow brings suspicion, tonight offers a measure of safety. The sensory assault is immediate and overwhelming. Smells of roasted meat, pungent hay, and curling smoke swirl together into a dense, inescapable fog. A faint tang of ale hangs in the air, mingling with the sharp sweetness of candied nuts sold from small wooden trays. Music drifts from fiddles and hand drums, their rhythms uneven but infectious, while voices rise in both laughter and argument, one merchant bellowing over another, children shrieking in delight as they chase each other between stalls. You edge through the tide of people until you find a quiet corner behind a tent, the canvas sagging under the weight of evening dew, its seams patched with rough stitches. Here, on a bed of trampled straw scattered with bits of wool and dirt, you can curl up without anyone shoving you out, at least for a night. A mainstream historical fact, medieval fairs were more than commercial hubs, they were social events sanctioned by local lords, often tied to feast days or religious observances. They stood as markers of the agricultural calendar, harvest fairs, spring markets, midsummer gatherings, times when the rhythm of daily survival briefly gave way to celebration. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were primarily economic engines fueling trade routes or social safety nets, allowing travelers and peasants temporary refuge alongside the bustle. For you, either way, it's a chance to sleep off your fatigue without paying a farthing. The official blessing of the church or the Lord mattered little compared to the unspoken blessing of a warm fire and the chance to go unnoticed. The quirky tidbit, in some fairs, jugglers and fire breathers were rumored to double as spies or troublemakers, slipping between stalls to trade whispers for coin. Tales suggested that one could measure a town's vigilance by how many performers ended up in the stocks by dawn. Old women muttered that flame eaters often carried secrets hotter than their torches, or that jugglers could pick a purse clean while the crowd clapped at their tricks. You, lying quietly in the straw, pretend to ignore the flickering flames of a fire eater nearby. His torchlight leaps across the canvas like restless shadows, and though his performance draws laughter, you secretly hope you don't become part of the show, dragged out as an unwilling volunteer, or worse, robbed while distracted by the blaze. Life at the fair at night is oddly communal, even among strangers. Other travelers like you, hungry, tired, and weary, curl into corners of tents, sharing scraps of bread, roasted chestnuts gone soft, and gossip about which nobleman's entourage is expected to pass through tomorrow. One man boasts of seeing knights in bright surcoats at the last fair, another swears he caught sight of a pilgrim bearing relics from the Holy Land. The air is colder than it seems, damp from dew and tinged with smoke, but the sheer number of bodies clustered together generates warmth. You snuggle closer to a fellow traveler's cloak, praying that your neighbor doesn't snore, or worse, steal your meager coin stash while you sleep. The closeness is uncomfortable, yet strangely reassuring, as if misfortune shared becomes a little lighter. Fairs come with hazards, and you know them well. Pickpockets slip like eels between careless merchants, rowdy youths make night a game of jeers and thrown stones, drunken fights spark from the clash of ale and pride. And while a barn might shield you from wind and a shrine from thieves, a fairground tent offers no walls, just thin canvas, fraying ropes, and the mixture of stranger's breath and animal musk pressing in on all sides. Still, you feel a flicker of safety in numbers. The chaotic energy of the fair acts as a sort of accidental security system. Mischief is everywhere. But so is distraction. A thief here will find a dozen other targets before settling on you, and that small chance is enough to lull you into uneasy rest. By morning, the rhythm shifts again. Vendors awake to reset their stalls, pack away goods, and prepare for another day of commerce. Chickens squawk in wicker cages, donkeys bray, and the dull clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings across the field. You emerge from your temporary refuge, hay tangled in your hair, clothes damp from dew, and stomach rumbling with renewed urgency. Around you, the fair dissolves into the surrounding fields, tents taken down with practiced speed, leaving only bare ground pocked with footprints, dropped feathers, and the faint scent of spilled ale. What lingers is less the sight of the fair itself than the memory of warmth, noise, and anonymity in the chaos. It's a brief reprieve from the endless road, one you will savor until the next cold night, and perhaps remember with a bittersweet fondness when silence once again becomes your only companion. The road stretches beyond the fair, twisting through fields that slope gently into small forests. The laughter and clamor of the marketplace fade into memory, replaced by the muted hum of insects and the rustle of wind in tall grass. With no inns in sight and villages miles apart, you begin to consider the most primal option, sleeping in the wild. Forests and hedgerows are risky, yes, but sometimes they're the only choice. You select a cluster of trees, the underbrush thick enough to shield you from prying eyes, and settle in, pulling your cloak around yourself like a thin wall against the chill. The fabric smells faintly of sweat and smoke, a reminder of both safety and hardship. The forest smells of damp leaves, moss, and earth, a rich aroma that's almost comforting compared to barn straw or market cobblestones. The faint sweetness of decaying wood lingers in the air, mingled with the sharp resin of pine. You lie on a bed of needles, soft enough to dull the ache of your bones but prickly enough to remind you you're far from luxury. The uneven ground presses into your ribs, and the cloak beneath your cheek is no pillow, yet it feels more forgiving than the cold stone of a shrine porch. Historians still argue whether peasants preferred open fields with wide visibility or dense hedgerows for nighttime concealment. Some accounts suggest open skies allowed quicker escape if danger approached, while others claim that shadows and brush offered the better shield. The truth is you choose whatever gives a sense of safety, however fleeting, guided less by reason than by instinct. A quirky tidbit: some peasants carried small charms, tiny iron nails, sprigs of herbs, or even smooth river pebbles, believing they could ward off evil spirits in the woods. Amulets were sometimes sewn into hems or tucked into shoes, hidden from sight but close to skin. You slip a sprig of rosemary under your cloak, half in superstition, half because it smells better than wet pine needles. The fragrance is sharp, almost medicinal, and its presence comforts you in ways logic cannot explain. Your imagination works overtime in these dark spaces, every rustle of grass or snap of twig becomes a potential threat. Wolves roam the forests, foxes scavenge boldly, and the occasional wandering dog noses through the undergrowth. More unsettling still are the sounds without source, branches creaking, shadows shifting, the whispered suggestion of a presence that cannot be seen. Night in the forest is alive in a way daylight never reveals. Owls call to each other with haunting clarity, their voices carrying like questions unanswered. The wind whips through branches, making them groan like old timbers or murmur like distant voices. Somewhere in the dark, a stream gurgles faintly, its rhythm almost soothing. Your body huddles against the cold, every muscle tense, waiting for footsteps that never come. Yet exhaustion wins, as it always does, and sleep eventually drags you down. You dream in fragments, barns where straw scratches but warms, church porches echoing with hymns, alehouse benches sticky with spilled drink, market squares alive with color, and the gentle warmth of monastic halls. In the wilderness, dreams become a bridge between hardship and hope, weaving scraps of comfort into your restless night. You wake with dew soaking your cloak, leaves clinging stubbornly to your hair, and the faint sound of morning birdsong. The sky glows faintly gray, then pale gold, and the forest, menacing in darkness, softens into a cathedral of green light. It is beautiful in daylight, but you know well that it is a trap at night, full of hidden teeth and silent watchers. For now, though, it has given you a chance to rest without eviction, without judgment, and without expectation. You rise slowly, joints stiff, brushing needles from your clothes. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, but the air feels fresh, almost cleansing, and your heart steadier for having endured. The wild teaches you resilience. You've slept beneath stars that have watched centuries of travelers pass, felt damp soil against your body as though the earth itself cradled you, and learned that the line between danger and shelter is thinner than you ever imagined. Every snapped twig reminds you of fragility, every dawn that follows reminds you of persistence. With each step toward the next village, the next barn, or the next shrine, you carry both exhaustion and the quiet pride of having survived yet another night. It is not triumph in the grand sense, but a quiet, stubborn defiance against the cold and the dark, a lesson written not in books but in aching bones and the rhythm of your own footsteps. When you finally stumble into a bustling town, the experience changes again. The open horizon of fields and forests gives way to walls of stone and timber, pressing close on either side. Urban streets are narrow, crowded, and chaotic, far different from quiet village paths or the rolling emptiness of open fields. Noise reverberates off hard walls, vendors shouting, smiths hammering, children chasing one another across uneven cobblestones. Carts bump along with squeals of wooden axles, rattling your already aching bones as you try to dodge out of their way. You've traveled far, but the city offers new possibilities, and new problems. For a night's rest, as a poor peasant, you have to get creative. Inns are far too expensive, their doors watched carefully to admit only those with heavy purses. The wealthy travelers and merchants claim the comfortable rooms, filling them with wine, song, and firelight. For you, survival means scanning for shadows, dark alleys behind tanneries, empty doorsteps beneath overhanging roofs, or the silent corners of abandoned workshops where the smell of dust masks your presence. You huddle in these spaces, pulling your cloak tight against the cold, hoping your shape disappears into the gloom. Guards patrol the streets, their footsteps echoing against stone, lanterns bobbing like restless fireflies. Historians still argue whether urban authorities tolerated overnight sleepers out of necessity. Too many bodies to remove each night, or punished them harshly to maintain order. Either way, survival in the city requires stealth, timing, and a willingness to vanish into cracks no one else notices. A quirky tidbit: some peasants discovered that sleeping near bakeries had unexpected advantages. The air was warmer near the ovens, and the faint glow of embers offered a softer night light than a torch on the street. The smell of bread, sharp with yeast and flour, lulled many into dreams of full stomachs. Even the crumbs on the floor attracted birds, which could be trapped in the morning, a small meal eked from the city's refuse. But warmth draws company, cats slink across the floors, their green eyes glinting in firelight, tails twitching in warning. You try not to move when one brushes your cloak, pretending you are neither threat nor thief, only another shadow competing for space in the warmth. The urban night has its own hazards. Rats thicker than any you've seen scuttle along alleyways, bold as soldiers, sniffing out scraps. Their squeaks echo in the stone canyons of the streets, a constant reminder that hunger has many sharp teeth. You avoid puddles of stagnant water that reflect torchlight like broken glass and stink of tallow and waste. Somewhere, a dog barks, and the sound ricochets off the walls, stirring your nerves. Every noise, footsteps of guards, the shuffle of drunks returning late, the grind of a cartwheel, sets your pulse racing. And yet, beneath the chaos, there's a rhythm here. The city hums with its own strange lullaby, the layered sounds of stone, wood, and shadow pressing together until your heartbeat matches its pulse. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You press yourself against a doorway, legs curled beneath you, cheek resting against cold wood worn smooth by years of hands and hinges. The air smells of baking bread, burning tallow candles, wet leather drying from an afternoon rain. It is an odd mix, sour and sweet, but one you begin to recognize as a kind of signature for every town. Sleep drags you down in fragments, light, restless, full of half-dreams. You see barns glowing with lanterns, shrines echoing with chant, alehouse benches sticky with spilled ale, all the places that have offered shelter along your journey. A dog noses at your boot, sniffing curiously before deciding you're harmless. Its nails click against cobblestones as it wanders off. Leaving you alone again, dawn breaks with an explosion of noise, merchants raising shutters, carts clattering on their first deliveries, voices rising in barter and banter. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings out like a bell, sharp and relentless, pulling you awake. You rise stiff and wet, cloak damp from dew and stray puddles, hair matted against your forehead. Hunger gnaws, but relief lingers. You are alive, not trampled, not dragged away, not noticed. Urban streets are not forgiving, yet tonight you survived, folded into the margins of the city while its heart roared around you. Tomorrow, the road will call again, as it always does. You will follow it, weary but enduring. Always searching for the next patch of warmth, safety, and rest hidden in plain sight. After leaving the city's noisy streets, the road stretches into open countryside once more. Your feet are sore, blistered from cobblestones, and your cloak hangs damp and stiff with dew and smoke. Yet the open air feels like a reprieve, the horizon widening, the noise of merchants and guards fading into memory. The day's light gives you hope. In this quiet landscape, survival feels less like a battle and more like a gamble you might actually win. Small hamlets dot the distance, tiny clusters of thatched roofs pressed close together, where villagers bend over fields or guide animals along hedgerows. Here, you have a chance to negotiate a night's lodging, or at least a corner to rest. Without the threat of city patrols or alehouse brawls, approaching the first hamlet, you catch sight of smoke curling from crooked chimneys, gray ribbons against the pale sky, a comforting signal that someone is home. Chickens scatter across the path as you enter, and the air smells of manure mixed with stew, unappealing but reassuring, proof of life and work. As you step closer, villagers pause their chores, eyes narrowing at the sight of a stranger with a travel-stained cloak. A woman grips her child's hand tighter, a man leans on his hoe and watches carefully. You smile, bow slightly, and hope your appearance doesn't scream trouble. Hospitality at this scale is personal, unpredictable. A family might invite you in exchange for a helping hand with firewood or mending fences. Or they might offer space simply out of habit, or out of fear that turning away a traveler could bring divine punishment. Historians still argue whether peasant hospitality was born from kindness, practicality, or a blend of superstition and survival. If welcomed, you are led inside a cramped home where smoke lingers low in the rafters, the hearth fire glowing red. A small corner is cleared for you, perhaps near the fire, perhaps in a loft above the animals. The straw mattress is thin, uneven, but still a mercy for aching bones, and a patched blanket shields you from the creeping chill of night. Children stare at you from across the room until they are hushed by their mother, and you lie down, feeling the fire's warmth seep slowly into your stiff muscles. Compared to the open fields or a city alley, it is an almost unimaginable luxury, for walls, a roof, and a hearth to guard the darkness, a quirky tidbit. In some regions, families sprinkled herbs or coarse grains over the straw to keep away lice and mice. Your blanket smells faintly of lavender or thyme, clinging to the fabric like a promise of comfort. It makes you smile, though part of you knows fleas and other pests are already burrowing in. You settle in anyway, half amused at the thought of such rituals, half grateful that someone cared enough to offer even this small kindness. The night passes slowly, but without incident. The hamlet lies hushed beneath the stars, only the occasional cough or the soft clatter of a shutter carried on the wind breaking the stillness. A rooster crows prematurely, then falls silent again. You drift between wakefulness and dreams, aware of the ordinary rhythm of human life unfolding around you, the sigh of someone rolling over in their sleep, the crackle of embers settling, the low breathing of livestock in the next room. For once, there is no fear of bandits, no risk of drunken patrons stumbling into you. No guards waiting to drag you into the street. The quiet itself becomes a kind of protection. By morning, you rise stiff but steadier than before, brushing straw from your hair. The household stirs early, someone hands you a slice of coarse bread, another offers a small mug of warm milk. Neither is much, but both carry the taste of welcome. A child waves shyly as you gather your cloak, and the adults give you a nod or a brief blessing before returning to their work. Stepping back onto the road, your pack heavier with renewed spirit, your heart feels unexpectedly lighter. Each successful night of shelter, whether barn, shrine, or hamlet corner, reinforces your resilience and the fragile thread of community that sustains weary travelers. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but today you carry the memory of warmth, trust, and human kindness alongside your cloak, your hunger, and your endless footsteps. The next stretch of road leads you into the domain of river crossings and small ferries. The path bends and dips, guiding you toward glimmering ribbons of water that thread their way across the countryside. Streams and shallow rivers can be deceptively treacherous, especially after heavy rain, their gentle surface hiding strong undercurrents or sudden drops. For the weary traveler, these waterways are both obstacle and lifeline, danger to the careless, salvation to the prepared. Wooden bridges are scarce, and when they do appear, they are often controlled by local lords or ferrymen, who demand a toll in coin, goods, or labor. For a poor peasant like you, such prices are steep. The banks themselves become the more likely resting places, grassy embankments. Soft hollows beneath willow trees, or flat patches worn by the countless footsteps of those who came before, you eventually settle in a hollow just off the bank, where the earth dips low and a willow spreads its long green arms over the water. The sound of water gurgling over stones carries through the evening air, soothing your travel-worn nerves. The scent of wet earth, reeds, and faint algae rises with each breath of wind. You can almost taste the dampness on your tongue, a reminder that rivers provide not only comfort but also risk. Mainstream historical fact: medieval travelers often camped along rivers because water was vital for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. Yet these same waters carried the threat of disease. Unseen and silent, lingering in every mouthful. Historians still debate whether certain riverbank spots were maintained intentionally for travelers, shaped by custom and habit, or if they were simply taken over by wanderers desperate for charity, trade, or safety. You pull your cloak more tightly around your shoulders, leaning back against the trunk of the willow. The bark presses rough and ridged against your spine, grounding you in the present moment. Insects hum in the tall grasses nearby, occasionally darting too close, their tiny bites a nuisance that you try, and fail, to ignore. Still, the natural rhythm of the place holds you. The river murmurs with steady patience, a constant reminder that the land continues its flow whether you rest or move. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, riverbanks bore carved stones or small wooden shrines to river saints, believed to guard travelers from drowning. You pass your hand along the soil beside you and feel the edge of a weathered stone, smoothed by years of rain and touch. Though the carving has long since eroded, you imagine it once bore a simple cross or symbol of protection. Superstition and practicality mingle here, as they often do. With a quiet smile, you pick up a small pebble from the water's edge and tuck it into your pocket, telling yourself it might serve as a guardian through the night. As the sun sinks low, the river changes character. Frogs begin their rhythmic chorus, a pulsing chant that rises and falls in waves. Bats skim the surface of the water, wings whispering as they chase insects invisible to your tired eyes. The air cools quickly, carrying with it a sharper edge that prickles your skin. You press closer into the hollow of the embankment, using the rise of earth as a shield against the breeze and against any wandering animals that might stumble too close. From time to time, the silence breaks, a splash as a fish leaps, the rustle of leaves overhead, or the soft crack of a twig snapping somewhere in the dark. Each sound startles your heart for a moment, but gradually you learn to fold them into the rhythm of the place. Sleep comes in hesitant waves, never quite deep but enough to drag your body into rest. You drift in and out of dreams, flashes of barns with warm hay, church porches with cool stone, market squares alive with noise. Here, the dream is always laced with water, the steady flow echoing through your mind even when your eyes are closed. Oddly, it is more soothing than the chaos of fairs or alehouses, a lullaby spun not from human voices but from the land itself. By night's end, your body aches with stiffness, the ground pressing hard against your bones. Yet there is a faint refreshment, too, a sense that you've touched something elemental. The riverbank is quiet, and in its silence, you feel a thread of connection to the land and to the countless other souls who once rested here. Whispering prayers to river saints or clutching charms for safety, dawn comes softly, light glinting on the rippling surface of the water. Mist hangs low over the river, curling in pale strands that catch the first warmth of the sun. You rise, brushing dew from your cloak, and stretch your sore limbs. The pebble still rests in your pocket, cool and reassuring against your fingers. With a last glance at the flowing river, you turn back to the road. Today it stretches onward, winding toward new hardships and fleeting comforts. Yet in your mind you carry the memory of this night, the gurgle of water, the whisper of willow leaves, the strange solace of resting at the river's edge, joining barns, stone crosses, shrines, alehouse benches, market squares, and now this quiet bank is part of your hard-earned repertoire of survival. The final night of this leg of your journey approaches, and you stumble upon a familiar sight, a farmhouse perched near a hill, smoke curling lazily from its chimney, animals stirring in nearby pens. It's the kind of place that seems ordinary by day, but at dusk, to a weary traveler like you, it radiates possibility. Families here often had room to spare, or at least enough straw in a loft to grant a night's reprieve from the unrelenting road. You approach cautiously, wiping mud from your boots, and are greeted by a curious glance from the farmer's wife. A nod, a question about your travels, and a simple invitation to share the warmth of the hearth. Mainstream historical fact: many rural households followed custom rather than law, offering temporary lodging to travelers for a night in exchange for minor work or simply out of goodwill. Historians still argue whether this hospitality was motivated more by social expectation, religious duty, or the practical hope of future favors. Inside, the smell of cooking fills the air, bread baking, stew simmering, and the faint tang of livestock from adjoining stalls. You sink into a corner of straw in the loft, your cloak beneath you, and let the warmth of the household wash over aching limbs. A quirky tidbit: some households sprinkled fine sand or herbs in straw to deter pests, and tonight, you notice the faint scent of rosemary blending with hay, a fragrant reassurance against fleas. You close your eyes, letting the simple routine of farm life lull you into sleep, the night passes without interruption. Chickens cluck softly in the yard below, a cat purrs in a corner, and the low murmur of the family's conversation drifts upward. Outside, wind rustles through the trees, but inside, safety prevails. You think back on all the places you've rested: alehouse benches, market squares, church porches, barns, shrines, riverbanks, city shadows, and now this farmhouse loft. Each night brought discomfort, danger, and sometimes kindness, weaving together a patchwork of experience that defines your life on the road. As dawn breaks, you rise slowly, muscles stiff but spirit fortified. The farmhouse doors open, and you step out, greeted by sunlight and the chirping of birds. Your sack is no heavier, your coin pouch no fuller, but your body and mind carry the reassurance of survival. Another journey begins, another road stretches forward, and yet the memory of these nights, so hard, so humble, so human, remains. And now, as the day fully awakens around you, we slow our pace. The roads you've walked stretch far into memory, each night a mosaic of stone, straw, smoke, and shadow. Feel the ache in your legs ease, the tightness in your shoulders melt, as if the journey itself softens under your breath. Imagine the warmth of hearths, the faint scent of rosemary and hay, the gentle rhythm of river water and nocturnal wildlife, each a quiet companion, each a lullaby. There is safety in the simple, a reminder that even on the edge of survival, kindness appears in small gestures: a loaf of bread pressed into a hand, a nod from a stranger, a corner of straw offered without question. Close your eyes and picture yourself there, resting among villagers, monks, or under the watchful gaze of a roadside cross, where shadows dance gently and the night hums its soft symphony. Let your mind drift over the diversity of spaces that gave you shelter: barns, churches, fairs, market squares, riverbanks, toll huts, alehouses, and recognize the thread that binds them: human resourcefulness, resilience, and quiet compassion. Each night, no matter how uncomfortable, offered a small gift, a moment of rest, a chance to breathe, to dream, to survive another day. Now, as your breathing slows, imagine the road stretching forward under golden dawn, empty and serene, inviting you to continue but allowing you to linger in the comfort of remembered warmth. Let the last echoes of cobblestones, straw, and river water fade gently into your mind. You are safe, you are rested, and for tonight, the journey can pause. Sleep comes quietly, steadily, and completely. Tomorrow, the road will call again, but for now, let it wait. Let your heart settle, your muscles soften, and your thoughts drift, as the world outside continues, unnoticed and forgiving.